All right, Judge DeLeon, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And
So
so
you want to ask me the question?
so the one question we're going to ask you to start off with, and then maybe have some clarifying questions and some follow-ups. Judge, when you become mayor, what are you going to do about poverty?
Okay, well, first, combating gun violence is my first challenge that I would address through implementation of my gun violence reduction plan. This plan will mobilize grassroots community organizations supported by city funding to implement mentoring and intervention actions directed at our young people who are seeking answers to their perceived dead-end cycle of poverty through violence and antisocial behaviors. These programs will be directed to altering these young people's negative and limited visions of society and re-engage them into a more positive, future-thinking reality of what life can be without resorting to uncontrolled rage. It is that rage that ultimately leads to gun violence and mindless criminal behavior. An important component of my plan is to provide mental health resources to the communities impacted by violence, especially resources that will address PTSD in the community. Job training and employment opportunities will also be part of my plan that will be geared towards allowing those who are involved in criminal behaviors and violence a means to earn money and build a career that will allow them to become productive members of our communities by making these individuals productive through wage earning jobs that support an individual's needs. The cycle of generational poverty that plagues the majority of these communities in our city that suffer under the weight of crime and gun violence will be broken. In order to achieve the reduction of gun violence and criminal behavior that is ravaging our city, I would also implement economic opportunities for our citizens who are victims of cyclic generational poverty. These programs would be grounded in job training, job and career opportunities, employment access, access to financial management, education, and entrepreneurial education. An important component of bringing these communities out of this generational cycle of poverty is to create a better public health system. This health care equity is vital to ensure that our city's disadvantaged citizens receive the resources necessary to lead healthy and productive lives so that they can also become and stay financially stable. This approach will ensure that all residents of this city receive the medical and mental health resources necessary to stabilize the communities and its members and make our citizens part of the societal solution to the city's economic and societal problems. To push economic development and improve our city residents' access to higher wage jobs, I would initiate solution-based citywide listening sessions with business owners, especially small business owners, with the goal of providing economic incentives to those businesses who offered higher wage earning opportunities to city residents. I would task the city's Chamber of Commerce with developing processes and procedures to immediately increase our large business sectors and assist in establishing business incubators in our neighborhoods. I would also provide city funds to improve and preserve commercial business corridors. Finally, I would fund programs to implement technical assistance to all small businesses operating within the city of Philadelphia. That's the way that I would approach raising our people out of poverty.
Okay, thank you, Judge. You touched on a lot of things there. Denise, do you want to go first? Or...
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. Many studies have been conducted that show that the way to get out of the gun violence problem is to first address the poverty issue. It sounds like you want to do this in reverse, which has been shown not to work. Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, I think you did, because I specifically said that we would address the issues of poverty by working with giving mentors to those particular youth and giving them the resources that they need, the job counseling that they need to turn them around from going into the areas of violence that they're going into. I mean, where did I say something?
If I understood you correctly, and this is just my interpretation of what you said, unless you kind of have to deal with the circumstances within the neighborhoods,
right,
before you can even apply a program or something like that.
right.
You get into a little bit more of the detail of how you would do that, because like I said, everyone has come up with something similar, and we are still the poorest big city in America with one of the highest rates of gun violence. So I would kind of like some details.
Okay, well, in reality, let's go over this one more time. We start by mobilizing grassroots community organizations supported by city funding to implement mentoring and intervention actions directed at the young people.
Right, but
So,
what does that mean?
That means that we're going to...
What does that mean?
That means that we're going to give neighborhood organizations funds to work with neighborhood youth, to bring those youth in their neighborhood out of the situation that they're in. We have to have neighbors helping neighbors to help a neighborhood. I can't take people from somewhere else across the city and put them in a neighborhood to help specific people in that neighborhood. It has to be people that know the neighborhood. So it's the grassroots neighborhood people that are going to be working with their neighborhoods to bring their neighborhoods out of the situation they're in.
But how will you know who best to are you talking to neighborhood groups now? Are you going into neighborhoods and seeing where the issues are and connecting with the people who are dealing with those issues? How do you find out who's the best people to work with?
Well, we started, I brought it up with the Black clergy, okay, number one, as because they have like faith-based resources, and and also I brought it up with the Democratic Party, with their constituents, that they know the neighborhoods and the people in the neighborhoods that can help those neighborhoods. So the church is very important in a situation like this, because their church members, they're from those communities and they work within those communities, both the Catholic Church and other organizations, including the mosque. I just met with the imam last week about whether or not they would need a program like this, and he was very much on board. They want to have these kind of programs. They just need the funding, and they know where to go.
Okay. Now, one of the issues that we've kind of had when it comes to funding the city giving money to people to combat gun violence is that it's been given to grassroots organizations without any kind of oversight or assistance really in how to best apply that money. Will your plan to give money to the grassroots to deal with poverty have someone who basically helps these organizations be able to best use this money in a way that serves the citizens?
Yes, I would appoint a commissioner of public safety. He would also have the title of deputy mayor. So the commissioner of public safety would be a former FBI, either male or female. And that person's specific job is to implement, he would implement what's known as the LIMS program, a local incident management program, where I would declare that all gun violence in Philadelphia is a dramatic incident. Mm-hmm. And that would put into play the LIMS program, where he would coordinate with all the necessary responders that would enable him to more effectively and efficiently combat and manage the root causes of gun violence. So that individual would be the person who would be the boot on the ground to make sure that the organizations that would be used to combat gun violence to start to bring the neighborhood out of poverty would get the correct resources and management.
Okay. Larry, did you have any questions?
I do. Judge, I want to talk a little bit about like economic programs. And, you know, we have a lot of conversation about how Philadelphia is the poorest big city in America, 26% poverty rate. But in terms of deposits in banks, we're like the 9th wealthiest city, like in the world, apparently. You know, so there's this great disparity in the middle. Big difference between the wealthiest people and the poorest people. So how do we start to spur economic development in the places that need it most and start to even that out a little bit?
Okay, so let's take our favorite whipping post, Kensington.
Mm-hmm.
And let's look there, because that is an area of the city that needs help. If we can bring Kensington back, we know we can bring any place back. So what we're looking at, we have to reduce the crime, treat the people, and recover the neighborhood. So what we're doing, we're going in with crime reduction. The people in Kensington are, I would declare it a dramatic incident and put the local incident management program into place, where you're looking at the people as displaced or misplaced people. So we set up staging areas to move those people into, well, down a line where each one of the individuals, we would be able to assess their needs, assess what that person needs to make themselves whole again, whether or not it's mental health, PTSD, drug treatment, any of those type of housing, any of those type of things. And we move them along and we give them what they need in order to take them out of that neighborhood and set them on the road for recovery for themselves. Now we have all those closed businesses down there. This is where we bring in to recover the neighborhood. That's where the chambers of commerce come in, both the normal chamber of commerce, the African-American chamber of commerce, the Hispanic chamber of commerce, the Asian chamber of commerce. We make deals with the people there. The stores have been closed anyway. So we make deals with the owners of those stores that we can get the square footage not at a reasonable price, that we can move in the chambers of commerce, they can move in businesses into those stores, and therefore we're recovering the neighborhood.
Okay. You had mentioned something that, you know, when we talk about, and we talk a lot about poverty on our show, you don't hear too much about this, and I thought it was really interesting you brought this up, public health. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Tell us what you have in mind for public health and how you think that relates to poverty.
Well, we know that as far as Black females are concerned who are giving birth, that they have a high mortality rate. And all this is coming from the health that people are giving or receiving. So when we go into the neighborhood to recover the neighborhood, we have to make sure that we have a strong public health system that goes into the neighborhood as well. That's all part of the LIMS program, the local incident management system. That look at it like a disaster area. So, you know, because the local incident system comes from the national system, whenever there is a disaster, the federal government moves in with specific organizations to help the people out to bring that particular community back. It's the same thing on the local level, except it's not a disaster like a God-given disaster, but it's a human disaster. So we're using the exact same resources to recover the neighborhood that we would be using if it was a natural disaster. We're moving in the health system to take care of all the individuals in that particular area of the city that we're working in, to get them the particular proper care they need to make themselves better.
So are you talking about brick and mortar facilities that the city's going to sponsor? Is it something like that?
Well, it could. It could be a staging area. You can use either you could either use that or a mobile staging area. So it depends on what you have. If you want to get in there fast before you can get a brick and mortar staging area, you might have to go on with a mobile staging area because you got to get it started. Okay, once you get it started and you see where it's going, if you have to be there for an extended period of time in order to recover that neighborhood, then you're going to need brick and mortar.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up a very serious problem: Black mortality, infant mortality. I think the United States in that category is like 130th in the world, something like that. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. So doing about something like that when we talk about poverty, that makes perfect sense to me. You had mentioned job training, and this is really interesting. I feel like there's a little bit of a push right now in our local high schools in order to create a pipeline to not just college, but trade school, CTE education, that kind of stuff. Is that something, when we talk about your job training ideas, that you would really be continuing to work on?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, in today's paper, right now in today's paper, they were talking about on front page of the Inquirer, they're talking about the technical jobs, and where the Chamber of Commerce now is putting a big push out for more technical workers. We have to have more of our schools putting people out for the jobs that are needed. Rather than some people, there used to be we used to have like a lot of technical schools here in Philadelphia, but and then also the counselors, they didn't do us any good when they would tell a child, well, you're not ready for college, but you can go to commercial. I mean, that wasn't it. They should have just said you can go either one, because both of those positions earn a good living, and in reality, they both can make the same amount of money. If you're proficient in technical fields as you are in the academic field. So I feel that we have to study where the jobs are needed and channel students to those jobs right here in Philadelphia, rather than just like letting them go into anything they want to go in. Give them the choices, show them the choices where jobs are needed.
All right, so my last question for you, Judge. Let's fast forward to a cold day in January 2024. You've been inaugurated. It's your first day. What are the first things you're going to do to help alleviate poverty in the city? What are your first executive orders, plans? How do you do that?
I'm going to, the first day, well, remember, the safety of our citizen is the number one, or of the people, is the number one job of the mayor. So the first thing I would do is declare all shootings in Philadelphia a dramatic incident. And that's a difference than saying that it's a state of emergency. A dramatic incident, matter of fact, whenever there is a catastrophe, a hurricane, a flooding, a storm that destroys a community, they do not call that a state of emergency. That's called a dramatic incident. Okay, because see, the difference is with a state of emergency, you lose your constitutional rights. And in a municipality can only call a state of emergency for 7 straight days. That's all. So if you haven't solved the problem within that 7 days, then what are you going to do what are you going to do next? And during that 7 days, when you call a state of emergency, you're taking away from 1.6 million people freedom of speech, right of assembly, due process of laws. But with a dramatic incident, you put all the resources that I was talking about to solve the problem of gun violence by using the LIM system, which is a set of processes and procedures that the city government would use to combat gun violence by allowing the necessary responders to enact more efficiently and effectively to manage the root causes of gun violence. So that's what would go on first. I would do the dramatic incident and get directly on reducing that gun violence. That's number one. But the people would still have their constitutional rights, and it would be the exact same resources being used that would be used in a state of emergency where the people lose their rights.
All right, Judge Jamie DeLeon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate your questions. I'm so glad you asked those questions.
Well, great. And thank you for joining us.
Yes. thank you.
Okay.